and that can be done if we prioritize home care for our loved ones. Not only is it better for their health, better for their well-being, but the idea that people staying in their home and having services come in, it creates a better environment for folks. It creates an opportunity to age in place, if you will. It provides an opportunity for people to have peace of mind, to have familiar surroundings, and all of those things contribute positively to their well-being. And that's something that we all deserve. The other thing is we need to make sure that we have culturally appropriate home care, where people from community can provide service in a way that is culturally responsive, and that's something that we believe is necessary not only in home care but in long-term care as well. So I'm happy to be here with Neethan Shan, who is our candidate for Scarborough Centre, which is what I knew, but I always check just in case. Scarborough Centre, and we have with us MPP Doly Begum, who is the MPP for Scarborough Southwest, and so we're happy to be here to answer your questions and hear what's on your mind. And so I'll send it over to Neethan to say a few words, and then Doly.
Thank you everyone for coming today. I'm going to make my remarks in Tamil. எல்லோருக்கும் வணக்கம். இன்றைக்கு நாங்கள் இங்கே கூடியிருக்கிறதுக்கான முக்கிய காரணம், மூத்தோர்கள் தங்களது வீடுகளில் இருந்து கொண்டே தங்களுக்கு தேவையான சுகாதார, மருத்துவ, ஆரோக்கிய சம்பந்தமான பராமரிப்பை பெற்றுக்கொள்வதற்கான திட்டங்களை வலுப்படுத்துவதற்கான உறுதியை ஒன்டாரியோ NDP கட்சியின் சார்பாக ஒன்டாரியோ NDP கட்சியின் தலைவர் ஆண்ட்ரியா ஹோவர்த் அவர்கள் இன்று வெளியிட்டிருக்கின்றார். உங்களுக்கு தெரியும், எங்களில் பல மூத்தோர்கள் வீடுகளிலே அவர்கள் பிள்ளைகளோடு இருந்து விட்டு அவர்கள் பிள்ளைகள் சென்ற பின்பு அந்த வீட்டிலே வாழ வேண்டும், அந்த வீட்டிலே தங்களுக்குரிய முதுமை பருவத்தை கழித்து கொள்ள வேண்டும் என்ற ஆவலோடு இருக்கின்றவர்களுக்கு தேவையான சுகாதார மருத்துவ தேவைகளை அந்த வீட்டிலே அவர்களுக்கு வழங்குகின்ற பொழுது அவர்கள் நீண்ட காலம் அவர்களது வீட்டிலே, அவர்களது சூழலிலே, அவர்களுக்கு பழக்கப்பட்ட இடத்திலே வாழ்வதற்கான வசதிகள் அதிகமாக இருக்கின்றது. அந்த மருத்துவ வசதிகள் வழங்கப்படாத பட்சத்திலே அவர்கள் ஒரு நீண்டகால பராமரிப்பு நிலையத்துக்கு இல்லத்துக்கு செல்ல வேண்டிய தேவை ஏற்படுகின்றது. ஆகவே இந்த வீடிலிருந்து அவர்களை பராமரிக்கின்ற அந்த திட்டத்திற்கான நிதி ஒதுக்கீடு என்பது கடந்த பல வருடங்களாக கன்சர்வேட்டிவ் மற்றும் லிபரல் கட்சியின் ஆட்சிகளிலே பல்வேறு விதமான நிதி ஒதுக்கீடில் வெட்டுக்கள் விழப்பட்டு ஒரு சரியான தரமான ஒரு சேவையை, மருத்துவ சுகாதார ஆரோக்கிய சேவையை எங்கள் மூத்தோர்களுக்கு வழங்குவதற்கான வசதி கடந்த காலங்களில் ஏற்படவில்லை. குறிப்பாக எத்தனை மணித்தியாலம் அவர்களுக்கு உதவி செய்யலாம் என்பதில் இருக்கக்கூடிய மணித்தியாலங்கள் சுருக்கப்பட்டு அங்கு வேலை செய்கின்ற தாதியர்கள் அல்லது பர்சனல் சப்போர்ட் ஒர்க்கர்ஸுக்குரிய உதவிகள், அவர்களுக்குரிய ஊதியம் குறைக்கப்பட்டு ஒருவர் பல இடங்களில் வேலை செய்ய வேண்டிய நிலையும் ஊதியம் குறைக்கப்பட்ட நிலையிலும் அதற்கான வேலைகளுக்கு ஆட்கள் எடுப்பதே பெரிய கஷ்டமாக இருக்கக்கூடிய இந்த சூழலே இந்த நீண்டகால பராமரிப்பு திட்டத்தை வலுப்படுத்துவதற்காக அந்த ஊழியர்களுக்கான சம்பளம், அவர்களுக்கான முழுநேர பணி போன்றவற்றோடு மூத்தோர்களுக்கு கிடைக்கக்கூடிய எத்தனை மணித்தியாலத்துக்கான சுகாதார சேவை கிடைக்கின்றது என்ற போன்றவற்றை வலுப்படுத்துவதற்கான ஒரு திட்டமாக இந்த திட்டத்தை உறுதியை வழங்கியிருக்கின்றோம். அந்த உறுதி பற்றிய விடயங்கள் ஏற்கனவே இங்கு பகிரப்பட்டது. அது பற்றிய கேள்விகளும் அதே நேரத்தில் வேறு என்ன விடயத்தை பற்றிய கேள்விகளும் என்று உங்களுடன் ஒரு கலந்துரையாடலாக இதற்கு பின்பு தொடரலாம்.
Thanks, Neethan, and then we'll hear a few words from Doly Begum, and then we'll take your questions. I want to wait for a second while there's a couple people showed up to maybe give you a chance to set up. Is that all right?
Yep.
And welcome to everyone joining in. Did you want to come here and just sit us? Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Neethan. Good morning, everyone. I'm Doly Begum, the MPP for Scarborough Southwest, home to a strong group of not just Tamil Canadians, but I think a lot of Tamil elders that we're very proud to have the advice, the blessings of, and one of the things I've always heard about is that they want to stay home with their loved ones, and the best way to do that is to make sure that we have home care where personal support workers, and I know Neethan just spoke about, and I understood a few words in between, and he spoke about the Ontario NDP's plan to make sure that we have quality home care in Ontario. And that means it's also culturally sensitive. It is catering to our community needs, language needs, food. One of the things our elders hate in the hospitals, I know firsthand, is not being able to eat properly, not being able to communicate, and something we have seen in hospitals during the pandemic, where a lot of seniors, a lot of people who are not able to have that ability to just ask for what they need. To make sure that when we're talking about elder care, making sure when we're talking about seniors care, we are catering to culturally sensitive care for our seniors. So I won't go too much into it because I know both Andrea and Neethan covered it. But I'm so proud to support this plan, a plan that we're focusing on with the way that province is shaped, with the way the people that represent this province. So thank you very much for being here today, and we're happy to answer any questions about home care and anything else that is about this province. Thank you.
Thanks, Doly. So now the floor is over to you folks. If you have any questions or comments that you wanted to make, or any questions you wanted to ask, Neethan, Doly, myself, we're happy to take your questions, and we appreciate you being here.
You just mentioned this has been already announced by your company. Is it an announcement or is it bill coming to the Queen's Park?
This afternoon's motion.
Oh, yeah, so it's an announcement. Today we made the announcement here in this community, but we are going to go to Queen's Park with our plan. We're going to debate it this afternoon and try to get Doug Ford and the Conservative government to agree to our plan for home care. That's what we want, and they'll have a chance to vote on it. You'll know how we're going to vote, obviously, because it's our motion. But these issues are important to us, and every chance we get to force the government to have a conversation about how we're failing our seniors it's important. So we're going to do that this afternoon. So our motion calls for more investment in home care. Our motion calls for taking the profits out of the home care system, because every public dollar should be invested in the care of our seniors, and it speaks to some of the issues that Doly and Neethan have just raised. So the vote should come sometime in the afternoon. The debate will start probably around 1:30, I would guess, and then the vote will come about an hour and a half after that.
So this is exclusively for the seniors, those who want to stay in their home.
Yeah, it's for anybody who, so it's for seniors, but it's also for people who, for example, you have an injury and your mobility gets impacted, and you can no longer kind of manage your daily chores, your daily requirements. You can't fix yourself your own meals. You can't do your laundry, and if people don't have any help, they end up having to go into long-term care, for example. So we know that there are younger people in long-term care as well, but largely what we've heard for a very long time now is that people don't want to be institutionalized. They want to get the care that they need as they age and otherwise, but particularly for seniors as they age. They want to get that care at home, and their family members want them to be able to be at home. I don't know how many times I've heard people say, don't send me to long-term care. If I'm getting a little bit older, I'd rather have somebody in. And I've heard family members feel guilty. They've told me they feel guilty about having to send their loved ones to long-term care. And we can fix that by making sure we have a home care system that meets people's needs. And right now, home care is about 50% of people who are referred for home care. You have to get a referral from a doctor. If you're referred to home care, 50% of referrals are not being filled. We had a PSW in with our press conference this morning. She said she was exposed to COVID. So she was required, because she's a healthcare provider, PSW, she was required to take 10 days to isolate. And she had 3 clients, and they didn't get the care they needed. She said their health noticeably deteriorated even after 10 days. They didn't get bathed. For 10 days, they didn't get bathed. There was some extra help that came in, but not familiar, not like a total stranger, somebody that these clients or patients had never seen before. So it was not a good thing, and that's just one example. As an MPP, and I don't know if Doly's had this experience yet, but oftentimes you get to January, when it's near the end of the fiscal year, and all of a sudden we get all these calls from home care, from people who are getting their home care hours cut because, it's getting near the end of the year, the fiscal year, and the money isn't there anymore. The money's, been used up, and the government won't provide the money necessary to give people the hours that they need, and the quality of care deteriorates just because of the fiscal year, and that should never be happening. People deserve the support. They deserve the confidence that their PSW is going to be there for them, or their nurse in some cases, or their home care support. Like some people get help with, as I talked about, groceries, laundry, those kinds of things. People should never be left wondering whether the provider is going to be showing up or not, or whether they're all of a sudden going to have their hours cut back, which we know is happening because it's completely underfunded in Ontario. You're welcome to ask questions on any topic that you're interested in as well, right? So anything you want to talk about is fair game.
Thank you so much for inviting us. First of all, my name is Shan and I'm from East from 100.7 radio station, the Tamil community. I have 2 questions, Andrea. One is regarding about the PSW and nurses, because there are a lot of ads right now from the nursing associations demanding, increasing nurses, because within the last 2 years of pandemic, we had hospitalizations in Shan, and then there's no any proper plan to have more patients on the emergency or even ICU, and then they have to run around to get more nurses, and then they were demanding to go nurses with the COVID-19 as well, right? So what is your plan about that? And is there any plan for ONDP if they're going to win in this election? Are they going to, give more chances to nurses, or are they bringing more nurses to the table? That's one thing. Second is, I know you had another motions you brought it to the Queen's Park about the price increase on gas, right? So what's your plan on that? What are we going to see the output out of that? Would you be able to elaborate on those 2?
Thank you for those 2 questions. And I'll respond, and then if anybody wants to add anything, you're welcome to. On the nursing shortage, healthcare worker shortage, really, it's a huge problem. The estimates range from between 15 and 25,000 nurses alone are needed. So our worry is that this government has no plan. There's really no plan to beef up staffing in our healthcare system, and we saw what happened in long-term care after the first wave. Doug Ford pretended he was going to put an iron ring around long-term care, and he didn't. Whereas British Columbia, Quebec, they went into a massive hiring blitz, and both of those provinces did much better when it came to to the second wave and the third wave. Well, the third wave, vaccines were here, so it was a little bit better, but the staffing shortages weren't fixed in the third wave. So there continued to be problems in the third wave, in the Omicron wave. But so what we're committed to actually putting together a staffing plan that includes a number of things. Foreign trained nurses, particularly. We know that there are barriers. In fact, you can maybe speak to that, Doly. Doly has some legislation that she's put in place to make sure that the barriers are taken down, so that people who are trained to be nurses in other jurisdictions and other countries can do that. We know that there are thousands of them here in Ontario that aren't able to do nursing. because of some of those barriers. In terms of the staffing shortage that we have, we want to return the people who have left. Right? We know a lot of people have left healthcare. They've burnt out. They're traumatized. They're exhausted, and we need to get them back into the field. We need to retain the ones that are still there. Just reading an article just as we were waiting for this to start about a nurse in tears every day at work still because the patient load is too high. They don't have enough help, and they're walking away from their jobs. And so you can't bring people in. You can't recruit more people to jobs that are terrible because there's not enough staff, and then they just walk out. They come in the front door and walk out the back door. So it's retaining the ones we have and recruiting new people in, and it's also making sure that we give people the opportunity to practice in their field. Now, we know that there are nurses that have retired, and we need to use their expertise to help train up the new recruits. So there's recruitment, there's hiring, and there's using the skills that we have in a better way.
Just to follow up on that, I mean, when you say for the home services, right? I mean, obviously, especially with the nurses of PSW, you still have to hire, right? Like, I mean, now, what's the period of this plan, like, or how long they can start to use the services, or like, when do you think, like, seniors will be able to grab this, right, for them, right up there, and they can use these services?
And so there's different phases will take different amounts of time. So we can reduce the barriers very quickly and get people on the job very quickly. We can use so one of the things that I didn't mention is that one of the reasons that a lot of nurses are giving up, and PSWs as well, is because of Doug Ford's low wage policy. So we've got Bill 124. They feel that they're being disrespected. They feel that there's a government that just that says the right things around them being healthcare heroes, but is not providing the mental health supports they need and is keeping their wages down. And with inflation where it is now, at 5%, a 1% wage increase means you're getting a 4% wage cut. And that's what a lot of nurses are talking about now, and lots of PSWs as well. People are very unhappy. So how do you retain people? How do you retain people in the field if they feel not only tired and burnt out because so many have left, but then disrespected and undervalued? So Bill 124 is another piece of that, and we will scrap that immediately. If we're elected, we will immediately scrap Bill 124. We've already spoken to and met with the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario. We've met and spoken to the unions that represent PSWs, as well as the not-for-profit organizations that hire PSWs and put them to work. And there are solutions, absolutely, that we can start implementing right away. And that's why I talk about not only the retaining of people through making sure it's a decent place to work. With PSWs, they need full-time jobs. Not everybody wants a full-time job, but they need full-time jobs, and they need to be paid properly. We've got an immediate $5 an hour increase, permanent, for PSWs. Then we actually have to look at what is it in the healthcare system that creates inequities. So that, for example, a lot of PSWs left home care and long-term care to work in hospital because the wages are better there, and they get better benefits. We have PSWs, we have nurses that are working part-time that don't get sick days, that don't get any benefits because it's cheaper that way. Well, we need to treat these people with the dignity and quality of life they deserve. And so wages and working conditions are absolutely a part of that as well. I'm going to get Doly to talk about her bill in 1 second. I just want to say, in terms of the gas prices, we've tabled this legislation for gas price regulation many times now. The Liberals wouldn't support it, and the Conservatives don't support it. But everybody sees what happens on a long weekend in the summer, for example. Long weekends coming, all of a sudden the price of gas goes up 5 cents a liter, right? We see it happen over and over again. We know that in Ontario, price of gas is much more expensive in Northern Ontario. we get it. You got to ship the gas up there. That's going to cost a little bit more money, but no, there's no accountability at all in terms of that differential. But even here, you could go get gas in one gas station, and drive 40 minutes from one end of Scarborough to the other, and the gas price is different. And that happens all over the province. It happens in the GTA, it happens in rural Ontario and small town Ontario. There's just no rhyme or reason as to how the gas prices are being set. And that's not fair to the consumer. That's the bottom line. So our bill will regulate gas prices. So on a Monday, the price of gas will be set, and it'll stay that same price until the following Monday. Now it's not something that isn't already being done. It's not pie in the sky. The eastern provinces all have gas price regulation, most of them, I think. Yeah, I think all of them, actually. Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, Newfoundland and Labrador. Quebec has gas price regulations. Many of the U.S. states in the U.S. have gas price regulation, because nobody should be getting gouged by the big oil companies. That's all it is. The big oil companies gouging the consumer, and people pay through the nose. And so that's what our bill does. Our bill will, and it's interesting, because with the gas prices the way they are because of the war and what's happening in Ukraine, what we want to make sure, and this bill will help us do that as well, is once the gas prices start to go down, that consumers are not getting gouged in that process either. That consumers are getting a fair shake at the pumps once things settle in terms of the war and what that pressure is doing right now. So on that note, Doly, do you want to talk a little bit about not a little bit, as much as you like, about your bill?
Thank you, Andrea. So I'll just add a little bit about some of the barriers that Andrea talked about. We're really excited to be introducing a bill this week to just address the barriers we have seen in our healthcare system when it comes to internationally trained professionals. And a specific section of the bill is focused on internationally trained healthcare workers. When we talk about nurses, for example, doctors, one of the biggest challenges we have faced in our hospitals, in our healthcare system across this province, is that there's a lack of nurses, lack of doctors, lack of PSWs, therapists, for example. And we spoke with a lot of different people from different countries from across the world that have come here, and the federal government recognizes that skills when it's in the point system, when you immigrate here. However, in the province, that skill is not recognized. In fact, it becomes really cumbersome, really difficult for people to even find a pathway. So our bill looks at that specific problem, understands the difficulty a lot of people face when it comes to just having an accent. Even though you had 15 years of experience working as a nurse, just because you have an accent and don't have a path, you're not able to practice and end up cleaning at a hotel. And no job is less than any other, but it's important that we recognize that people who bring that skill is valuable here. They can contribute, and they should make a living, right? They're putting food on the table for their family. So this bill will look at how do we make sure that we work with internationally trained professionals, internationally trained healthcare workers, bring them together at the table, along with stakeholders who are in charge of these regulations, this process of creating bridging programs, creating pathways to make sure that they're able to practice in their field. So we're really proud of it, and I'm happy to elaborate a little bit more if you have any specific questions.
Sorry, just to follow up on that, I think it's a good point you mentioned that accent, barrier them to practice as much. At the same time, there are some people who have practiced in back home, but they may have language barrier to practice out here, right? Now, with that motion, will help them also, or just only the certain things will to practice them as a nurse or PSW?
So one of the things we're looking for specifically is to make sure that the regulatory bodies, so for example, the colleges, the regulatory organizations, the Registered Nurses Association or the Ontario Nurses Association or the Ontario Medical Association, so the different stakeholders come at the table as well, and the government has a mandate to make sure that we work together to come up with a process that allows a nurse, for example, who's from anywhere in the world, from South Asia, has come here, has 15 years of experience. So if that nurse, if she is able to, or if he's able to go through a bridging program or a pathway that allows them to get the experience that they need, because right now there's a requirement in order to be recognized. But what they end up with is that there's no pathway to get that experience. So then when you go to get a job, someone says, go get experience for your resume. But when you go to get experience, you are told to make sure that you have experience. And you're kind of stuck in a loop, which makes no sense. So that Canadian experience requirement or the language requirement, all of that will be taken into consideration when you sit at the table to come up with that bridging program or that practice-ready assessment process, which is one of the specific barrier that they face. And then once they do that, they would be able to go into the actual work field. And I'm sure you heard recently the government announced the internationally educated nurses being hired or expedited. But the issue was that only those who have met the requirements and were on the waiting list were actually being allowed to be even assessed for that. So those nurses were only being actually considered, which is a shame because a lot of people were given a lot of hope, but they were not actually given the opportunity to even practice. So when you look at just 1,200 people being expedited when we need thousands of nurses, and as Andrea said, we need to make sure that we're giving the resources, the human resources, right? We need to hire thousands of nurses, thousands of PSWs, not just 1,200. And that's what we're seeing right now, just sort of a little bit of little actions when we need larger actions in the province.
Just quickly add on. Just to add on that, I think it's also to bring a sense of accountability and transparency around this process, because we know that 15, 20 years ago, Canadian experience was a generally used term, and now that research and activists have pointed out and academics have pointed out that the requirement around Canadian experience is actually, in fact, discriminatory, because you got to specify which aspects of your job actually require Canadian experience, which aspects don't. So when international trained professionals are going through this process, it's not that they have to go through certain things, but what they're being asked to go through are, in fact, necessary steps for incorporating, not necessarily by, making them go through things that they've already done and having to spend time and energy and resources and money while they adjust to a new environment. So bring that level of accountability through legislation is critical, because Ontario College of whatever it is, whether it's physicians or nurses, or all of them have been predominantly using this process in some ways there has been barriers created as part of this process, and this has been going on for probably decades and decades, and different versions of the bill have come. But what these bills have failed is to put a level of accountability around some of these measures that are required of people, and I think as we move through this bill, NDP is committed, Ontario NDP is committed to make sure that those systemic barriers are removed. It's not to add additional programs and so on to people to go through more to get there, but because I have first-hand experience, because my father was a nursing instructor. He was a nurse for a long period of time, and in fact then he taught nurses who went and worked internationally in many countries. And when he came here, he had to go through so many things, and he had to work in an assembly line for a few years before he was able to practice at East York General Hospital, which is now a different name. But so it's that process seems like a genuine process of fitting into a new place. But many of the things he was trying to prove that he can do were things that he didn't have to. And I think that's part of the issue with the issue that we are facing as well. So hopefully that will get addressed through the bill as well.
There's a specific requirement to go and to be able to practice. So you have to go through a certain process in order to find that.
Because the system is different from Canada, from the other countries.
That's actually the interesting part. So when we look at healthcare sector and the certification process, I talked to a nurse yesterday who's internationally educated, and unless she gets Canadian experience, and that's also most recent, then she won't be able to practice. So what she was telling me is that she actually went back to the Philippines recently to practice there for a few months and came back because she doesn't want to lose her recent experience. Otherwise, if it's more than 3 years, then she won't be able to even be considered here. So she'll completely lose her license. Yeah. So, and this is somebody who's living in Canada right now and working as a PSW. So I mean, this is a real example that I'm telling you about someone I talked to yesterday. Another doctor I talked to, for example, who lives in Canada, drives down to the US every single morning to work as a doctor, comes back at night in Fort Erie and sleeps with her and lives with her family, and then goes back in the morning to the US because the US recognizes her skill, but she's not recognized here in Canada.
I think one other thing I'll mention also is that the idea of regulation is to figure out whether that person is able to do the job or not. It's not to figure out whether there's a shortage or there's a oversupply or demand. So I think sometimes that message gets mixed up. So what we heard before is that if there's increased number of pool, it's not up to the methods of integration to decide that we only need this many nurses, so we'll only pick those based on selections. If somebody is qualified, they should be able to enter the pool and not necessarily be determined by the level of employment opportunities, because initially what happened is that a lot of the people who are qualified were given the impression, because there is an oversupply of certain jobs, that they were not able to get through because of that. And so the regulation needs to be kind of independent from labor market to decide whether this person is ready and they can do the job, and then that brings a level of accountability. So that is something that people, now we have a shortage, but just because the shortage, and if 10 years down the road, if there's an oversupply, it still shouldn't deter somebody who's qualified from entering the pool.
Can I just say that, and we'll take your question next. Can I just say that for years and years now in Ontario, the nurses have been saying they need more nurses. There's a crisis of, this is before COVID-19, a crisis of retirement where lots of the older experienced nurses were starting to retire in big numbers. And the Liberal government was told for years that they needed to beef up the nursing numbers, as well as the nurses have been advocating for at least 70% of nursing positions to be full-time. And the Liberals didn't do that. They kept squeezing the hospital budgets in particular, but also long-term care and also home care. And of course, COVID came and everything has fallen apart. So there might have been times when the pool, if you want to call it that, of healthcare professionals was greater than what we needed, but it hasn't been that way for a long time. We have been underfunding our healthcare services for a long time, and that means people haven't been getting the jobs in the field. You were going to ask a question?
I'm aware there's a bridging program federally funded bridging program for internationally trained healthcare professionals, not specifically nurses or physicians. It's a healthcare professional in general. But how is your initiative going to be different what you're talking about?
I think Doly can answer that question. You heard the question, right, about the federal bridging programs.
There is a federal bridging program for internationally trained healthcare professionals. I used to work on that with the Community Center. But how that is going to be different on the initiative that you are talking about?
You can also say it's the first time any legislation is on.
Yeah. So one of the things that, and I would love to hear more about the federal program. So for nursing, for example, or healthcare regulation is it's provincial. So for example, even though the federal government recognizes a nurse coming in or a doctor coming in with those skills, and they do get the points when they immigrate here, unfortunately, within the province gets to decide then is that skill sufficient for the requirement for you to practice. And so what happens is, in Ontario, we actually have one of the systems where it's almost impossible to find a way to get through the door. Even to get that practice. So you need a supervisor. In order to get the supervisor, you need to have a network to understand how to navigate that system. We don't have a very good system for that. And this is actually one of the first times we're bringing a legislation, or any government has ever, because I don't think there has ever been any government legislation or any bill brought forward that actually focuses on internationally educated healthcare professionals to do that for what we're introducing in this bill. The other portion of it is, across the country, there are other provinces that have systems. So for example, in Alberta, they have listened to internationally educated healthcare workers and said, here are different ways we can do to give you practice-ready assessment, for example, so that you can find a way to get that experience and then become a full-fledged doctor or a nurse in Canada, recognized in Canada. I hope that explains that.
Can I say, it's interesting, the example that Doly gave about the nurse from the Philippines who was decided to go back for a couple of months so that she didn't lose her license to be a nurse in her own country. She was able to do that. How many others have not been able to do that? Couldn't go because maybe they couldn't afford it, couldn't go because of what might be going on, at home, why they decided to come to Canada in the first place, can't have little kids, can't be away from their kids to go and do that. So there's lots of things that would prevent somebody from taking that opportunity. So she's lucky that she was able to, but she should have never been. We shouldn't be putting people in those positions to have their licenses, expire because we haven't provided the pathways forward. And I just want to say a couple of years ago, I don't even know how many years ago now, several years ago, maybe 2000, I want to say 2007, around there. This issue, as Neethan said, is decades long. I mean, we've been dealing with this for decades and decades. I can remember when I was first on City Council in Hamilton, talking to people in my community in Hamilton Centre about these very issues. And what we had was the Liberal government of the day put together something called the Fairness Commissioner. I don't know if you folks remember that, but there is a person that was hired and an office set up to be the Fairness Commissioner that was supposed to bring fairness to all of these pieces, and nothing ever happened. I mean, she had a job, she had some staff, but not a single piece of legislation like what Doly put. So I asked Doly to do this job, how long ago now? Maybe a year? Yeah. About a year ago, I asked Doly to do this job because I thought, we're going to fight to become the government this time around. We fight always to become the government, but this time we have 40 MPPs going into this next election. Stephen Del Duca's got 5. We're ready. We have great, smart MPPs. We have great, smart candidates. So we're ready to take government, and we're going to fight to take it. But I didn't want to be in a position where, yet again, we're ignoring this extremely important issue. And so a year ago, I asked Doly, let's see what we can do. Can we do something? Can we actually start doing something to solve this? And I'm really grateful, and I'm really proud of the bill that she put forward, because there was never a piece of legislation like this. The Liberals, they put some window dressing, we call it window dressing on, made it all fancy, but didn't solve the problem. And of course, we're going backwards with the Conservatives in terms of our healthcare system. So thank you for doing that.
Awesome. With that, we're going to wrap up our Q&A portion of this. So, Ethan, if you'd like to deliver your comments.
எல்லாருக்கும் நன்றி. இங்கே வருகிறதுக்கு இது ஆரம்ப நிலை சந்திப்பாக பார்க்கலாம். ஏற்கனவே கூறியது போல் எங்களோட சமூகத்திற்கு பாதிக்கக்கூடிய சில விடயங்களை பற்றி பேசியிருந்தோம். ஒன்று, எங்களோட மூத்தோர்களுக்கான இல்லங்களில் வைத்தே பராமரிப்பதற்கான, அவர்களுக்கு ஆரோக்கிய மருத்துவ சேவைகள் வழங்குவதற்கான சேவைகளை வலுப்படுத்தி வீட்டிலே அவர்கள் தங்களது மூத்தோர்கள் தங்களது காலங்களை கழிப்பதற்கான வசதிகளை ஏற்படுத்தி கொடுப்பதற்கான விடயங்களை பேசியிருந்தோம். அத்தோடு விலைவாசி சம்பந்தமாக, குறிப்பாக கேஸ் விலை அதிகரித்து கொண்டு போவது பற்றியும் பேசியிருந்தோம். சர்வதேச அளவிலே தாயகத்திலே எங்களிடமிருந்து வரக்கூடிய ஏற்கனவே பல்வேறு பட்டங்களை பெற்று இங்கு வந்து அவர்களது தொழிலை செய்ய முடியாமல் இருக்கக்கூடிய, குறிப்பாக சுகாதார சேவைகள் இருக்கக்கூடியவர்களுக்கு சேவைகள் வழங்குவதை பற்றியும் பேசியிருந்தோம். தொடர்ந்து உங்களுக்கு இருக்கக்கூடிய விடயங்களை நேரடியாக எங்களுடன் பகிர்ந்து கொண்டு கேள்விகளை கேட்டு உங்களுக்கு இருக்கக்கூடிய சந்தேகங்கள் அல்லது கேள்விகள் இருக்கின்ற பொழுது தொடர்ந்து எங்களுடன் தொடர்பு கொள்ளுங்கள். நன்றி இந்த இணைந்து கொண்டதுக்கு, இந்த காலநிலையிலும் இங்கே வந்து இணைந்து கொண்டதுக்கு நன்றி.
Nandri. Thank you everyone for being here. It was a good conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I know that we say that there's mainstream media and ethnic media. To me, and I know Neethan believes this as well, this is mainstream media, because I know that our parents and our community members, they don't read like the Star or Golden Mail. They read the local newspapers, and you provide what's happening locally to those people. That's the source of information. So thank you for the work that you do very well.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. You okay?
Thank you.